Hi, everyone, and welcome to PR Club's 5 Minutes with the Finalists, where we are interviewing Super Bell finalists and winners from our annual Bell Ringer Awards. Today, we are chatting with Haley Melamed of Walker Sands and Gabby Zitterveld, CMO of Smart Eye, to talk about their campaign, spoiler alert, leading conversations on the future of tech and leadership, which won our Gold Bell in the Executive Thought Leadership and Visibility category and was also a Super Bell finalist last year. Thank you both so much for being here. Haley, I'll kick it over to you to start introductions before diving into some questions about the campaign.
Yeah, thank you so much for having us. I'm Haley Melamed. I am a senior PR director at Walker Sands, formerly March Communications, which I worked for during the time of this campaign that we're talking about today.
All right, and hi, I'm Gabby Zitterveld. I'm the Chief Marketing Officer at Smart Eye. And I actually came from Affectiva, an AI company based in Boston that got acquired by Smart Eye, a Swedish headquartered company, back in June of 2021. And March Communications, now Walker Sands, and Affectiva, now Smart Eye, we've been working together for pretty much 5 years already. So a lot of great stuff we've done together.
That's great, thank you. I think to start off, it'd be great if you could give us a brief overview of your campaign, touching on from how it came about, the goals you wanted to accomplish, key messages you were trying to deliver, KPIs you wanted to measure against, and the ultimate results.
Yeah, why don't I just intro it for a little bit of context, and then Haley, you can jump in on some of the campaign details. So Affectiva was co-founded by Dr. Rana El-Kalyoubi, who was also Affectiva's CEO prior to the acquisition. And she had written a memoir that was getting published in April of 2020. And it was a lead title for Penguin Random House. So a very reputable publishing house. We had an opportunity to closely align with their marketing team, with publicists, but there was an opportunity to do a lot more. We had all kinds of creative ideas, and that's how we brought in March Communications. So Haley, you want to talk a bit about what the plan was that we set out to do?
Yeah, so early on in this book launch journey, Rana had retained March Communications for sort of a special project to help with the book launch. As Gabby mentioned, we had been working together for several years at that time. So we had a unique perspective to offer in terms of our experience with Rana's voice and the narratives that she liked to tell, and the ability to be able to connect that back to Affectiva, because we knew that if we had a successful campaign with the book and with Rana's thought leadership, that could ultimately shed light positively back on the company from a corporate perspective as well. So we came on board to be involved with everything from the messaging to some of the thought leadership angles that would drive content and PR in collaboration with Penguin Random House and the publicity team, and also support on things such as the international book tour and in-person events that Rana would be participating in, just supporting with sort of abstracts for those and any storytelling materials that she may need. So there was a lot of effort put into planning this, I would say, in late 2019 and early 2020. But sort of where our story begins, no pun intended, was when everything changed in the world in March 2020 and COVID hit, which really forced us to pivot very quickly.
Yeah.
So at that point, we really wanted to replicate the media coverage and the reader engagement that Rana would have gotten through an in-person book tour or a PR campaign in normal times, so to speak. But we were contending with a news cycle that was more competitive and unpredictable than ever before, as I'm sure everyone here watching can agree. And also on top of that, we couldn't meet in person, bookstores were closed, events were canceled. And so all of the great planning work that we had done sort of went out the window, and it was time to start from scratch. And I think what's interesting to keep in mind here is that, COVID hit in March 2020 and her book was set to launch in April. So we had a very narrow window in which we really had to pivot.
And it was quite interesting, right, Haley? Because I think everyone, the whole world, we were all kind of reinventing what work and what events and what marketing was going to mean. No one really knew. One thing we knew for a fact is that this extensive book launch, this extensive global book tour that we had planned, none of that was happening. So, of course, it was hugely distressing to Rana, who kind of saw all these really fantastic plans and all these major commitments that were lined up, see that all more or less crumble. But it also required for us who had built the plan to pivot and get super creative in what this could look like. And at that time, no one really knew, right? So everything was fair game. And that's more or less when the fun started, because we sure got creative with this thing. I can talk to one aspect of it, and then Haley, I'll let you chime in on some other things. So events, right? You can't do this book tour. Bookstores are closed. Rana was going to do a keynote at South by Southwest. Well, 2 years later, now it's taking place again in Austin, actually. But she wasn't doing a keynote at South by Southwest in 2020. So how could we pivot? And very quickly, the marketing team over at Affectiva suggested we started doing a series of live stream events. We had already, for the company and together with Rana, experimented with doing LinkedIn live sessions. And as a matter of fact, we had bought this new tool that we were using to broadcast live streams to a number of different social media platforms. So we could stream to Rana's LinkedIn, where she already had a significant following, but we could also stream to her Facebook or to Affectiva's Facebook and LinkedIn pages. So we started experimenting, and together with March Communications, we came up with a number of themes that were predominant in the book. And Haley, I'll let you touch on those in a second. I'll just talk about the events for now. And tying these themes also to hot topics in technology, hot topics that were being discussed at the time. And we started identifying these thought leaders that could join Rana on a live stream event, very conversational, seemingly informal conversation. And it was just amazing the results we got. We did, over a period of a few months, we did 15 live stream events. We measured an attendance of over 80,000 viewers from 40 different countries. So here we were lamenting not being able to do a keynote at South by Southwest, which would have drawn an audience of 700 people in Austin, versus now over a period of just a couple of months, drawing 80,000 people from 40 different countries. It was a completely different scale. But another thing that was super interesting is we got quite creative and also a bit aggressive in our asks of these thought leaders. Let's get amazing people to talk to Rana. And these people were available. They themselves were stuck at home. They all saw their events getting canceled. They, at that time, I think now 2 years later, people are maybe a bit done with it, but at the time, they were interested in having a live stream conversation. And because it was a live stream and not a formal webinar, it was easy preparation for them. We made it look very informal. We were behind the scenes super methodical, very organized. We prepped for every single event. We promoted it on social media and in newsletters. We created promo materials that we packaged up and we gave to our guest speakers so that they could help promote. We even picked a set day and time, Tuesdays at noon, that Rana was going to live stream. So, but then when the conversations took place, they were informal. And what we also quickly learned, slick was dead. No one wanted to see overly produced events. The fact that she was basically just broadcasting from her living room or kitchen with someone else who was doing the same made it authentic and real. And these were just super interesting conversations at a scale and a reach we had never imagined before we even got thinking about doing this. So
Yeah,
over to you. Yeah, chime in, please.
It was such a nice silver lining, I think, to realize that even though we had lost something with those in-person events, we were still able to reach so much of a wider ranging audience than what we had even imagined previously. I think another aspect of the authenticity was being understanding of the times that we were living in and the things that were going to resonate with people at that moment. And that really ties back to our larger approach of shifting our messaging slightly. So Gabby alluded to this earlier, but there were several themes in the book. It was a book about what it means to be a woman in tech, a woman in leadership, what the future of AI looks like, what business leaders for startups and entrepreneurship go through and sort of that struggle. But we wanted to make sure that it was authentic and relevant to the experiences that we were collectively going through at that time in early COVID. And so instead of generally talking about the future of AI, we started thinking about how can we make content that speaks to the role of AI in connecting people during disconnected times, because actually the kind of AI that Affectiva pioneered really could have a potential role in emotionally connecting us in virtual worlds. So that was an approach that we took with that topic. And then instead of just broadly talking about women or in tech and leadership, we focused more on empathetic leadership and what it meant to be an empathetic leader during times of crisis. And so those themes that we pivoted to sort of helped influence the content for the talks. The speakers that we had join for Future of AI, one really amazing speaker that we had was Adam Shire, who's the co-founder of Siri and Viv Labs and currently an SVP of R&D at Samsung. That was one of my favorite conversations. And then on the women in leadership front, we had Pam Koska, who's the CEO of Allraise, which is an amazing organization supporting female founders and funders. And so by pivoting in that way, I think the talks were able to be a little bit more relevant. And we also replicated that in the content and media outreach that we did. So we did an op-ed for Rana that was published in Fast Company on this idea of AI connecting us in disconnected times. We did another op-ed on empathetic leadership that appeared in Inc. and was syndicated to Business Insider on the idea of empathetic leadership. So I think just being aware of the way that we needed to shift the stories that we were telling as well was really important and helped us to be successful, even amidst all of the different challenges that came up along the way. Some other interesting, I guess, KPIs and results to point to. One of our large goals going into the campaign was for the book to be on a bestseller list. And we ended up trending as the #1 release in AI women in business books on Amazon, which was pretty cool because those 3 distinct categories that Amazon had really represent sort of 3 of the key messages and audiences that we were trying to reach. So that was some great validation. And then really leaning into the virtual and thinking about what we could do from home more. Rana did a ton of podcasts. She did, I believe, over 20 of them. One really great one was the Tim Ferriss Show, which is a hugely popular podcast. So that was a great opportunity for her. In addition to doing her own live streams, she spoke on more than 40 external virtual events, including one with Facebook Women, which was super cool, with Wired and with Inc. And so I think all of these little things came together to really form a very impactful result where she could make genuine connections with her readers and reach sort of these different, very intentionally identified audiences that might resonate with the book, even though we weren't able to meet or do some of the campaigns that we had initially planned.
And Haley, what was interesting, right? And of course, in addition to that, crazy good media coverage, right? Just in all the various pubs that we were targeting, from business to tech to maybe kind of more general interest or leadership type of publications. So that, I think, 110 pieces of coverage, something like that. So that was outstanding. But what I thought was really interesting in all of that, so keep in mind, this was a memoir, right? This was our co-founder / CEO's book that was being launched. Yet we were able to tie it so well to the business and raise visibility for the company in that as well, right? Because of course, her personal narrative and that of the company are so intertwined, right? She will always talk about the company as one of her babies, right? One of her children. It's her invention. She pioneered the field of emotion AI. So inevitably her book talks about that. And in all these activities we undertook, many of those themes directly correlated back to the company. So that, of course, justified for me applying my marketing team to this initiative and spending a lot of time on it personally. But I think all around, for Rana's personal brand, for the brand and visibility of the company, it was such an amazing undertaking.
Yeah. And one of the things that's always going to make this such a fond memory, and one of the most interesting and rewarding campaigns that I've had a chance to work on in my career, is just thinking back to all of the days and the nights and weekends when we were being really scrappy and working together to figure out technology challenges for the live streams, or getting on the phone to iterate and ideate on messaging shifts. And I think the spirit of innovation that our teams had together was really challenging in the moment, but looking back on it, it was such a good experience. And I think we were able to really do something very new and impactful in the end. And I'm just so proud of this campaign.
Yeah, and as am I. The creativity was without bounds. One last thing I wanted to share, a fond memory I have in this, is the virtual book launch party.
Yeah, that was so fun.
So of course we had planned an event. I think we were hosting it maybe in our office. We had a beautiful office space at the time. We have since moved, but at the time, beautiful office space. And we were going to host a party and invite all these people and invite Penguin Random House folks to come from New York to Boston and participate. Now, of course, that was not taking place either. So we basically sat back with Haley and the March team and my marketing team, and we were like, okay, a virtual book launch party. What is that going to look like? And we went crazy with all our ideas. Everything was fair game. I think, of course, we had all kinds of like fun music playing. We had little video clips from that we had Rana create. We took photos from the album and made a photo collage that was kind of like a photo reel that was playing while people were coming into the event. And then we dumped all that stuff into a virtual gift bag for people so that—
Yeah, remember we made a playlist of songs that sort of resonated with her, represented different parts of her journey. And we had a recipe from growing up when she was growing up in Egypt, and put all of this into like a virtual goodie bag, so to speak.
We made her do, so she's a big Zumba fan, right? And the joke was always that her backup career plan was to be a Zumba instructor in case this whole startup thing didn't work and authoring didn't work out for her. So we had her create a little, I think she did it on Zoom in her backyard, a little video clip of her doing a few Zumba moves. That went into the gift bag, right? So it was a lot of fun, and people actually really appreciated it, because how do you do a virtual party? And
right.
But then again, we had a lot more people attending, because now her parents, who maybe they were even in Dubai at the time, right? They were in the Middle East at the time. They were able to dial in. Her family members in Cairo were able to dial in. We had members from Affectiva from all over the world participating. And of course, if you had done an in-person party, it would have been a lot smaller and we couldn't have reached everyone. So that was also super special and fun, because really in all of this, everything was fair game. We tried it, and if something didn't work, then we tried something else. And it was a great success, I would say.
That's great. Just hearing about, the scrappiness and how you were able to pivot in, such a challenging time, and hearing about the results that you were able to achieve is really, really inspiring. I think one other question that we had is, beyond just learning how to pivot and message shift, what lessons did you learn from putting on this campaign will you take with you moving forward?
I have one. For me, it was a big exercise in, Rana always talks about going along for the journey without attaching to outcomes. I think that was an important one. And as a PR person, so often we create these plans, whether that's for what you're going to do one day or for a larger campaign. And then, a last minute request comes up and you have to shift entirely. And this was the greatest exercise in flexibility that I've been through in my career. And so just underscoring that importance, as well as really thinking through the different audiences that you can reach with a story and coming up with a narrative that is going to resonate with them. I think the scale of our success was due to the fact that we thought about women that would be inspired by her story, technologists who would be interested in the innovations we were talking about in AI, business leaders who might learn lessons from her journey. I think thinking about those different audiences and really thinking about what they would appreciate, whether it's in an event or in a piece of content they're reading or what have you, that was something else that was just abundantly clear from this.
Yeah, absolutely. Those are really great, Haley, for sure. And I think, one of the key takeaways for me was that I think at the end of the day, it was really about, if you're dealt a really set of lousy cards and find yourself in a horrible situation, you can make something really amazing out of it. And I guess we got dealt a bunch of lemons and we made lemonade, right? It's a bit of a cliche, but we really did. We were dumbstruck. We had no clue what was hitting us all over the head. Yet we just went with it. And I think another lesson learned is that if you're open-minded and if you're creative and if you just put your heads together and just get it done, you can make amazing things happen. And we truly did. And I think in hindsight, right, there's always a little bit of that regret, like that there was never a proper book tour in bookstores, right? And that we had to miss all these events. And yes, there is some regret or sorrow maybe about that. But when we look at what we accomplished, we're all super proud of it. And we made something amazing out of a really, really horrible situation that affected everyone worldwide.
Great. Before we wrap up, is there anything else that either of you would like to add?
No, and the recording before that. No, I think we covered everything. Haley, any thoughts on your end? Will we do it again the same way, or will we do it different?
Will we do something differently next time?
Yeah, what would we do different?
That's interesting.
I have one. Why don't I start and then you can chime in here? I think in hindsight, right, we were quite aggressive in our asks of people, right? Like we got these amazing speakers to line up. I think in hindsight, we could have done more of that. We could have there were a few people that were like, no, we can't ask them. They're never going to do it. And maybe we should have asked.
Yeah.
So I think in hindsight, we were really onto something. Time was on our side, right? Because it was early days of the pandemic and people were still very open to this kind of stuff. Now 2 years into this, no one has an appetite for it anymore, but time was on our side. And I think we could have maybe gone a bit wilder and doing more of what we did.
Been a little more bold. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think so too, because we were just blown away by what people were willing to do and give to us. I think another thing that I'm encouraging clients to do now with like virtual events or campaigns is see if you can send something like in person to people. And I don't know what exactly that would have looked like, but for example, we had copies of the book that we could give away, or even like that little promo package, we could have packaged it up and sent to people maybe for the launch party. And I think just anything we could have done to create that sense of like togetherness during that time, that would have been a way to take it to the next level. But honestly, it's hard to think of from a marketing and PR perspective, what more we could have done, because your team with my team's assistance, we really just were firing on all cylinders. So
yeah, we were busy. I mean, there's not a lot of spare time, right? In hindsight, we can say, oh, we should have done that and that, but did we really have time for it? We were, like you said, firing on all cylinders, but it paid off, and it was a lot of fun, actually.
And I guess the last thing I'll add too is that I think it has kind of continued to influence some of our Marcom's activities still. Like I know you and the Affectiva team continued to do live streams, and I'll just point out that now that's very commonplace and everyone's doing virtual events, but at the time people were still figuring out how to do it, and we were also figuring it out alongside them, but just went for it a little bit earlier. But I think it's cool how kind of something that we tested and found success with has made its way into being a longer term part of the comms activity that we do for the company.
Yeah, absolutely. Good point, Haley. Good point.
Well, great. Thank you both so much for your time, and thanks everyone for tuning into this segment. You can check out prclub.org for more program information and other webinars that we are hosting in the future. Thank you.